The city had fallen asleep under a thick layer of mist when Devin Myers climbed into the driver's seat of bus 307. Midnight shifts weren't for everyone, but Devin liked the quiet. No honking horns, no impatient passengers. Just the hum of the engine and the rhythm of wheels turning over asphalt. That night, the depot was eerily silent. A flickering fluorescent light buzzed above his head as he sipped lukewarm coffee from his thermos. The dispatcher gave him a nod and muttered, "You've got the Ridgewood route tonight?" Devin frowned. Ridgewood? Thought that one was off the map after the accident last month. "Short-staffed," the dispatcher replied, not looking up from his paperwork. "You're just running the loop. Don't expect anyone. No stops past Hollow Creek." Devin nodded, unease crawling up his spine, but didn't argue. He knew better than to question a route assignment. By 12:15 a.m., bus 307 rolled out of the depot and onto the dimly lit streets. The city lights faded quickly, replaced by narrow stretches of road flanked by skeletal trees. The fog grew heavier, muting the world outside into a colorless blur. The first 3 stops were empty, as expected. Devin kept the doors shut and his eyes on the road. But at the 4th stop, Glen Hollow, a figure appeared. It stood at the edge of the bus shelter, completely still. Devin slowed down. He hadn't expected anyone, especially not out here. As the doors hissed open, the figure stepped on board. A woman in a long coat. Her face was pale, nearly gray, and her eyes seemed to absorb the dim light inside the bus. She didn't say a word. She didn't even look at him. She simply walked past, her footsteps making no sound against the floor, and sat at the very back. Devin cleared his throat. "Evening." No response. He shrugged and pulled away from the stop. Something about her unnerved him. Maybe it was how she didn't move. Not to adjust her coat, not to look out the window, not even to blink. He caught glimpses of her in the rearview mirror, but the fog made it hard to see clearly. Still, he could feel her presence, like a weight pressing against the air. The next few stops were empty. Devin didn't stop for long, just opened and shut the doors out of routine. The only passenger remained unmoving. When he reached the final scheduled stop, Hollow Creek, he turned in his seat and called out, "This is the end of the line." Silence. The woman didn't budge. Devin got up and walked down the aisle. "Ma'am?" As he approached, a sudden blast of cold air surged through the bus and the lights above flickered. The seat was empty. His heart thundered. She was gone. But he never heard her leave. And the back of the bus was now wet, as if it had just rained on that one seat. Devin stood frozen at the back of the bus, staring at the glistening wet seat. A cold mist lingered in the aisle, faint but noticeable, clinging to his arms like fog with fingers. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. Empty. The woman was simply gone. A cold draft swept through the bus, though all the windows were shut. He turned around quickly, heart pounding. No one was there, just the hiss of the heater and the low hum of the idling engine. He leaned down, inspecting the damp seat. A faint scent lingered, earthy, moldy, like rotting leaves after heavy rain. The backrest was cold to the touch. That seat had definitely been sat in, but by who or what, he no longer wanted to guess. Just as he turned to walk back to the front, something caught his eye. Footprints. Wet ones. Leading from the seat, up the aisle. Not toward the door, but toward the middle of the bus. Devin's breath caught. He hadn't heard footsteps. The woman had vanished. So who had left these? The footprints stopped halfway up the aisle. No trail continued. It was as if whoever or whatever had made them simply disappeared into the air. Shaking off the dread, Devin told himself it was a prank. Maybe a squatter with a sick sense of humor. Maybe she snuck off when he was distracted. Maybe the bus lights flickered again. A sharp, static click echoed from the speaker system. It hadn't been used all night. No announcements, no music, just silence. Until now. Through the old dusty intercom came a whisper. Not a voice, a breath. just a low, slow exhale that crackled in his ears. Then a word, faint, like it came from miles away. Stop! Devin's spine stiffened. He stared up at the speaker above his head. Who's there? He called out, voice cracking. The intercom hissed, then went silent. Devin hurried to the driver's seat, started the bus, and pulled away from the final stop. He told himself he just needed to finish the loop, park the bus, and go home. Maybe get a drink. Maybe 3. But as he drove back down the winding road through the woods, headlights cutting through thick fog, he glanced in the overhead mirror again, and his blood turned to ice. She was back, sitting in the same seat, unblinking, unmoving. Only this time, she was smiling. Devin gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. His eyes flicked back and forth between the road and the overhead mirror where the woman sat, silent, still, with a smile that twisted something deep inside him. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't even a polite one. It was wrong. Her lips curled too wide. Her cheeks didn't lift. Her eyes, those bottomless, dark wells, never blinked. They just stared forward. Not at him, not out the window. Just forward, as if watching something that wasn't there. He reached for the radio. Dispatch, this is bus 307, he said, trying to keep his voice level. I've got a situation. I picked up a passenger on Ridgewood. She vanished, then came back. She's not responding. Static answered him. Dispatch, do you copy? The radio popped, hissed, and then a voice came through, but it wasn't the dispatcher. It was the same breathy whisper from before. She never left. Devin dropped the radio. He looked into the mirror again. Her head had tilted slightly. Not a human tilt, more like a puppet's head, leaning too far on loose strings. His heart was pounding. He considered stopping the bus, getting out, running down the road until he found a house, a person, anything normal. But the night outside was thick with fog and shadow, and his instincts screamed that stepping off the bus would be even worse. He took the sharp turn onto Willow Bend a little too fast. The tires screeched, and the bus groaned under the sudden jolt. He glanced up. She was gone. Again. The seat was empty. But not dry. The same wet imprint was there. Only this time, water dripped steadily from the seat onto the floor. Drip, drip, drip. He didn't want to check the aisle again. He kept his eyes locked on the road ahead. But in the silence, he heard it. Footsteps. Not fast, not heavy, just patient. Step, step, step. Closer. Up the aisle. Devin forced his eyes to stay forward. He could feel her now, right behind him. The air turned colder than winter, and something unseen hovered just behind his shoulder. He gritted his teeth, his breath fogging up in the cold. And then, a whisper, not in the speaker this time, but directly in his ear. You missed a stop. Devin slammed the brakes. The bus screeched to a halt in the middle of the foggy road, tires skidding over wet asphalt. Everything inside lurched. His coffee thermos toppled and rolled down the aisle, clanking as it went. But he didn't move. He couldn't. He was frozen. Something had whispered in his ear. He knew it. Felt the cold breath against his skin. He wasn't imagining things anymore. I didn't miss anything, he muttered aloud, as if saying it would make it true. There's no more stops. He reached for the route sheet pinned near the dashboard. He scanned the list. Hollow Creek had been the final one. But when he looked again, his stomach dropped. There was a new line added at the bottom, written in red ink that hadn't been there before. Briar's End. He blinked hard. What the hell is Briar's End? The name sent a chill crawling down his back. He hadn't ever seen or heard of such a stop. It wasn't in the system. It wasn't in the city. But as he sat in disbelief, the headlights cut through the mist ahead, revealing a signpost. A rusted metal sign, barely hanging onto its crooked pole. Briar's End request stop. No, Devin whispered. No, no, no. But the bus jolted. as if something inside it shifted. The engine roared by itself, and the wheel turned on its own. The bus began to move slowly, as though guided by invisible hands. "Stop!" Devin shouted, trying to wrestle the wheel back. It didn't budge. His foot pressed the brake. Nothing. The pedal sank, but the bus kept crawling forward, as though gravity itself had changed. Fog thickened around the windshield, but through it, Devin began to see graves. The road had turned to gravel, then to cracked stone, and now to dirt. On either side of the path, crooked headstones jutted from the earth. Old, smashed, forgotten. And just ahead stood a bus stop sign. Buried halfway in the ground, its glass panels shattered, vines coiled around the pole like veins. The bus rolled to a stop on its own. Silence. Then a ding. The stop requested light blinked overhead, even though no one had pulled the cord. Devin sat there, breath shallow, pulse in his throat. And from the back of the bus, he heard a voice. A woman's voice. Soft. Sweet. "I'm home." The bus door hissed open. Devin hadn't touched a thing. He sat frozen in his seat, every nerve in his body on fire. The air was thick with rot now, like damp soil and old wood, like something had been pulled out of a grave and left to dry. The fog outside swirled like it was alive, curling toward the bus door, inviting, no, pulling something out. He glanced up at the mirror. She was back again. Standing this time, halfway down the aisle, her body silhouetted by the bus's dim emergency lights. Her neck was bent at an angle that made Devin wince. Her hands hung loose at her sides. And her feet, they were bare, caked with dirt. She began to walk toward the door, slow and steady. With each step, the bus groaned, as if the weight she carried was more than human. Devin wanted to speak, scream, demand to know what she was, but he couldn't move. She stopped at the doorway, turned her head toward him just slightly. Her eyes were darker than the night outside, empty, and yet they saw everything. Then she stepped off the bus, one foot into the mist, then the other. But the door didn't close. The usual hiss thump didn't come. The lights inside flickered when the stop requested. Light continued to blink, even though she was gone. Devin slowly reached for the door lever, tried to close it. It didn't respond. He looked back again, expecting her to be standing there in the aisle, smiling that awful smile. She wasn't. But something else had changed. The other seats weren't empty anymore. Shapes began to form in the gloom. Outlines of figures sitting still, too quiet. A man with no eyes. A woman with hair that hung like seaweed. A child whose face was a blur. All of them, staring forward, just like she had, as if they'd been there all along, waiting, watching. The last figure stepped onto the bus. A tall man in a conductor's coat, moth-eaten, damp, old. His face was hollow, his jaw slightly unhinged. He looked at Devin and smiled. "Route's not done yet." Devin's blood ran cold. The tall man in the ragged conductor's coat stepped fully into the bus, ducking slightly under the frame. His shoes, if they could be called that, were waterlogged and left dark, slick footprints on the floor. Devin stared in disbelief. The man's face was pale, sagging slightly at the corners like wet clay. But the worst part? His eyes, or rather, the absence of them. Where eyes should have been were just dark, puckered hollows. And yet, Devin felt like he was being seen, studied, measured. What are you?" Devin croaked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The man didn't answer. Instead, he moved down the aisle slowly, inspecting the passengers now seated behind Devin, each one still, each one unnatural. When he reached the back, he turned around and looked up toward the driver's seat, his head tilted once. And then he rang the bell. Ding! The bus's overhead lights snapped back on all at once, too bright, flickering wildly. The engine shuddered to life. And the doors, still wide open, slammed shut on their own. The wheel turned. The gear shifted. The bus began to drive itself again. "No," Devin muttered. "No, no, I'm the driver. I'm the one behind the wheel." He yanked at it. Nothing. It was stiff like fused metal. He slammed his foot on the brake. It went down but had no effect. He was just a passenger now. "Where are we going?" he shouted toward the conductor. Still no answer. But then, through the windshield, a different world emerged. Gone was the foggy night road. Now the landscape outside was wrong, a tangle of blackened trees with no leaves, twisted into claw-like shapes. The sky was a deep purple gray, churning like storm clouds. The ground on either side of the dirt path was littered with bones, human bones. One of the passengers began humming, a soft, warbling tune. Another leaned forward slightly, twitching like a broken marionette. And then the child, the one whose face had no detail, laughed. Not like a kid, not even like a person, but like something wearing the idea of a child. Devin couldn't breathe. He wasn't on Earth anymore. This wasn't a late-night bus route through a sleepy town. This was a one-way ride to a place no man should ever go. The conductor turned toward him once more, and with a hollow, distant voice, finally spoke. "We pick up the lost. You brought us here." Devin gripped the armrest, his knuckles white. The bus rattled along the dirt road at a steady, unnatural pace. Outside, the scenery shifted, twisted. Trees bent backward as if recoiling from the bus. The ground bled a dim, reddish glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. He tried again to stop the vehicle, slamming every control he could reach. Nothing responded. The dashboard lights flickered nonsense. Symbols he didn't recognize. Numbers that rolled backward. Letters that shifted when he blinked. The passengers remained motionless. Except for one. The woman who had stepped off earlier was back. She was sitting 2 rows behind him. How? He'd seen her leave, heard her say she was home. Now she sat silently, her head tilted to one side. Her dress looked wetter than before, clinging to her pale skin like old tissue. Her fingers tapped softly on the seat in front of her, in no pattern Devin could place. He turned around slowly. "What do you want from me?" he whispered. She smiled, that awful, broken smile. "You never noticed us before," she said, voice like damp paper. "You've driven this road for years, and you never looked." What are you talking about?" "The lost ones. We've been waiting, watching, hoping someone would remember." Devin shook his head. "I'm just a driver. I don't know you." "But you do." Her smile widened. "You passed me 10 years ago, standing at Briar's End. It was raining. I begged you to stop. You saw me in the mirror." "I don't remember," Devin muttered, but his heart pounded harder. "Yes, you do," she whispered. "You looked away." The child 2 seats behind her giggled. "He always looks away." Devin's breath caught. He remembered a storm, a shadow by the road, a figure he convinced himself wasn't real. "No one told me Briar's End was a real place," he snapped, desperate. The conductor's voice rumbled from the back, deeper now, almost sad. "That's the point." The landscape outside changed again. Buildings appeared, ruins crumbling and half swallowed by earth. Street signs leaned like drunken corpses, and all of them bore names Devin recognized from old routes long shut down. Forgotten stops, abandoned neighborhoods, places wiped from the map. And yet here they were. The dead were taking him on a tour through the memories he buried. A sharp turn threw him against the driver's window. Ahead, the road forked. One side dipped into pitch blackness. The other rose into smoke and lightning. And Devin finally understood. This wasn't about a destination. It was a reckoning. The fork in the road loomed ahead, and the bus didn't slow down. It veered left, into the dark. Not just darkness like nightfall or an unlit tunnel, but a total absence of light. Outside the windshield, the world vanished. There were no trees, no ground, not even a horizon. just a suffocating black, as if the bus had plunged into a void. Yet the bus moved on, steady, certain. Devin could no longer see anything beyond the glass, but the headlights still glowed, dim and useless, casting thin cones of yellow into the nothingness. Behind him, the passengers began to murmur. Quietly at first, then louder. Voices layered over one another in a low, eerie chant. Some in English, others in tongues Devin had never heard. He turned, and that's when he saw the thing at the back of the bus. It hadn't been there before. It didn't enter through the door. It simply was, sitting in the final seat. A shape that shifted each time Devin tried to focus. It pulsed with slow, unnatural movements, as if breathing through damp, invisible lungs. No face, no eyes. Just presence, weight, cold. The other passengers seemed to lean toward it slightly, like sunflowers turning toward a sun only they could see. The woman in the soaked dress was crying now. "I didn't want to bring him," she whispered, rocking slightly. "I begged the road not to call him." Devin backed away from the driver's seat, the useless wheels spinning freely under his hand. "Who is that?" he asked, voice shaking. The conductor turned slowly. His eyeless sockets faced the back of the bus. "That is who waits at the end." "I thought you were the one in charge," Devin whispered. "I only drive," the conductor said. "But I was the driver." The conductor tilted his head. "Then why did you stop listening?" Before Devin could answer, the shape at the back stood up, and the temperature dropped like a stone. The windows fogged instantly, moisture condensing inside the glass. The light bulbs above popped one by one. Darkness crept in, not from outside, but from the back of the bus, swallowing each row as it moved forward. And in that dark, Devin heard whispers. His own name, whispered in voices that sounded like passengers he'd left behind, people he never stopped for, lives he never thought twice about. The darkness reached the front row. The emergency lights flickered one last time. Then, the bus stopped. Not with a jolt, not with a skid, just ended. The engine died. Silence. Total, thick silence. And then the door hissed open, on its own. The shape was at Devin's side now, not behind. He didn't feel it move, but it was there, waiting. Devin couldn't breathe. The bus was still, silent, dead. The doors were open, but what lay beyond them wasn't a road or a station or any place he recognized. It was gray. Not fog, not smoke, just a heavy, endless gray that swallowed shapes in smothered depth. The kind of gray that sounded like silence, that tasted like dust. The passengers didn't move. Not one. But Devin knew somehow that they were waiting. The shape beside him, featureless, shifting, pressed closer without touching. His skin itched, his teeth ached, his heart stuttered in a way that wasn't natural. Then a whisper, "The fare." Devin blinked. "What?" "The fare must be paid." He turned toward the conductor. The figure was seated now, motionless, head bowed like a judge awaiting a verdict. "I don't have money," Devin said. His voice cracked. "You were paid already," the conductor murmured without looking up. "Every paycheck, every hour, every time you drove past the waiting, every time you told yourself it wasn't your problem." Devin's knees weakened. He slumped into the driver's seat. The air inside the bus felt thicker now. Each breath was work. "I didn't know," he whispered. The child behind him leaned forward, head turning too far on its neck. "But you saw us." Devin closed his eyes, but that made it worse. Because now, behind his eyelids, he saw flashes, brief, painful images. A girl standing alone in the rain, waving as his bus sped by. A man sitting slumped at a bench stop that had been closed for months. A group of teenagers, laughing and dancing as the bus rolled by their abandoned neighborhood without stopping. All of them gone. All of them left behind. "You chose not to remember," the soaked woman said from her seat. "You thought the night routes were just lonely." I didn't know, he shouted. Then why are you the last passenger now? She asked. The shape turned fully toward him. Its form rippled, then began to mirror his outline. Not perfectly, but enough. His height, his frame, even the same bus jacket. It was taking his place. No, not taking. Claiming it. The conductor finally looked up. All debts are paid one way or another. The passengers began to stand one by one, but still didn't approach the door. They weren't leaving. They were staying. Because this was his stop. The shape pressed a cold hand against his shoulder, and Devin understood. He wasn't the driver. He wasn't a passenger. He was the fare. Devin tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. His limbs felt like they were made of rusted iron, chained to the seat. The thing that mirrored him was now wearing his face. Not quite right. Its smile was too wide. The skin looked like it had been put on, not grown. Like a costume of flesh worn by something that didn't understand what it meant to be human. Devin looked into its eyes, his own eyes, and saw nothing behind them. No guilt, no memory, just function. The passengers stood silently, staring straight ahead, ignoring both versions of Devin. Their expressions were hollow, as if time had drained them of identity. They were no longer individuals. They were just remnants. The conductor remained seated at the back, but now he held something in his hands, a lantern made of bone and rusted wire. Inside, a tiny flame flickered, but the light it cast was black. The conductor raised it slowly. Devin's copy stepped forward and took the lantern. The conductor nodded once. "This bus never stops," he said softly. "It only exchanges." The door hissed shut, and then the engine roared to life. Not with gasoline or electricity. It sounded like the wind screaming through hollow places, like someone whispering regrets at the bottom of a well. The scenery outside the bus changed once again. No longer gray. Now it was memories. Devin saw them flash past the windows like a film strip tearing itself apart. His first solo night shift. His father warning him to never pick up passengers off the route. The girl with the backpack he pretended not to see. A dark figure waving near the woods. He'd accelerated. A schedule change he never questioned. Every single time he could have stopped. Every time he didn't. "You're not the first," said the thing with his face, turning back one last time. "But you'll be the last for a while." "What happens to me?" Devin croaked. The conductor replied without emotion. "You become one of us." The bus moved again, faster now. Outside the window, Devin saw his own body, still seated, growing distant. He was off the bus, still inside, but also outside. A passenger now. And he realized the others weren't staring ahead in trance. They were staring at him, welcoming him. Because every seat was taken by someone who had once driven past a ghost and looked away. Someone who ignored the lost. And Devin was just the newest shadow in a bus full of them. Devin's heart pounded, but it wasn't his own heart anymore. It was slower, hollow, echoing like footsteps in an empty hallway. He looked around the bus, but everything felt distorted. The seats stretched longer than before. The ceiling seemed higher, the walls closing in at the same time. The passengers, now more like phantoms, moved silently, drifting through the aisles without sound. Their faces were blank, but Devin recognized some of them. They were people he'd seen years ago, left behind at stops he never made. A woman with a cracked smile, a man who'd been waiting for the bus that never came, a child who used to wave goodbye every night, all trapped here, like him. The bus driver's seat was empty. Devin's doppelganger sat there now, steering with calm certainty. "You're part of the route now," the duplicate said softly. "This bus never ends. It travels the forgotten roads. We carry the lost and the ones who forgot to stop." Devin's voice caught in his throat. "Will I ever get off?" The driver shook his head slowly. "There is no end. Only the next stop. The next passenger." A shadow flickered outside the window. Another figure. Waiting. Devin felt a cold weight settle on his chest. The bus rolled forward into a night that never ended, where the last passenger was never quite alive, and the driver was always just one stop away from losing himself completely. The bus crawled through a landscape that wasn't a place, but a labyrinth of fading memories and half-forgotten regrets. The road twisted endlessly, like a serpent devouring its own tail. Devin's thoughts were heavy. He tried to hold on to who he was, but the edges of his mind were fraying. The longer he sat there, the more the shadow of the thing that wore his face seeped into his soul. Then suddenly the bus shuddered. The driver, the version of himself who had replaced him, turned to Devin and smiled that unnatural smile. "Oh, your stop is coming." Devin's breath caught. The bus slowed, the headlights piercing through the thick darkness to reveal a small, forgotten bus shelter. It was cracked, weathered, covered in moss with peeling paint. No one was waiting. No one ever was. The doors hissed open once more. Devin stood, feeling heavier with every step. Behind the shelter, a narrow path wound into the darkness, inviting, endless. "Step off," the duplicate whispered, "and join the waiting." Devin hesitated, then stepped down. The moment his feet touched the ground, the bus doors slammed shut. He turned to watch the bus vanish into the night, a soft hum fading with it. And then he was alone. But not really, because behind the shelter, shadows began to gather. Figures emerged from the darkness, faces blurry, forms shifting, waiting for their turn to board the midnight bus. Devin realized this was no escape. He was trapped in a loop of endless fare and forgotten souls. The last passenger was never human, but now neither was he.